Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. It's great to be back here in Birmingham in this very lecture theatre after 3 and a bit years, because I spoke here in May of 2019 for the Neem Tree Forum. I'm going to cover some of the same ground as Taj Hargey, although I can't copy his style at all, I'm afraid. I'm an accountant. So I'm going to talk about why some Muslims are opposed to secular democracy and tell you a bit about where I stand and also some thoughts that I have about how to achieve change. Because changing what people think is actually very, very hard and delicate. A brief disclaimer, Stephen's mentioned the many organisations that I belong to. In particular, I chair the Islam and Liberty Network, which believes that Islam is totally compatible, in fact requires religious freedom, political freedom and economic freedom. And I'll tell you later on why I'm a member of the National Secular Society. And if my technology works, the recording of my talk will end up on my website, where I've already got the talk that I gave here in May of 2019 about Israel and Palestine, and many other things in my writings about Islam as well. So what do many Muslims believe? Fundamentally, that Islam requires rule by God. Because of the technology, I can't actually see my own slides, but fundamentally that we should be ruled by a religious leader, a caliph, that the whole of Muslims worldwide should be united into a single political entity. The Ummah, the community of Muslims worldwide, should be together as a political state, ruled by Islamic law, with some provisions for Jews and Christians. And you often find Muslims in this country sticking up posters saying voting is shirk. And for those who are not Muslims, shirk is the most serious sin there is in Islam. It's equivalent to associating partners with God. And if you want to read some of the ideology and where this thinking comes from, I recommend this book by Abdul Allah Maududi, the founder of the Jamaat-e-Islam in the Indian subcontinent, who is one of the two intellectual godfathers of Islamism, the other one being Hassan al-Banna in Egypt, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. And you can find not a very good quality scan, but it's a free PDF scan quite easily on the internet. I've given you a link. So why do they believe this? It's important to recognize that they have some grounds. There are parts of the Quran that can be read to support the views of people like Maududi and Hassan al-Banna, and indeed the views of ISIS and the Taliban, because I'm quite blunt about it. The ISIS and Taliban are Muslims. They read the same Quran that I read, they just draw different conclusions from it. So this is one of the two, these are two of the verses that they rely upon. I've given you another one here, and I could give more, but I just want to briefly touch on the subject today in the limited time that I've got. There's also quite a lot of support from the hadith that Dr. Hargey mentioned, the writings and sayings, basically not writings of the Prophet, people's claims as to what they said, what they heard from their father, their grandfather, that the Prophet is reported to have said. And 200 or 300 years after the death of the Prophet, Bukhari in particular, and somebody called Muslim, it's confusing because that was his name. He was a Muslim, but his name was Muslim as well, went around collecting a hadith, as did some other people. And I just want to give you one example of a hadith from a Muslim's book, which basically says there will be 12 caliphs and they will all be drawn from the tribe of the Quraysh. So clearly this hadith, if you believe that hadith really are authentic, Is the Prophet saying that there should be a caliph, because that's clearly presumed by the hadith, and that they must come from the tribe of the Quraysh? So, where do I stand? This is from the website of the National Secular Society, where I explained why I joined the National Secular Society. I did it in particular to make a statement that being a member of the National Secular Society is in no way incompatible with having a religious belief. It just means that you believe that society should treat all religious views and views that have nothing to do with religion, atheism, humanism, as equal, and that the laws should be made in a rational process based upon our discussion and not upon trying to refer to religious texts. On my website you'll find the text of a talk that I gave about 10 years ago now to an Indonesian political party, an Islamist party called the Prosperous Justice Party, when they were visiting London. And that was the key message that I gave them, that nobody can stop being a Muslim or a Christian when they walk through the doors of Parliament, but the only arguments that are valid inside Parliament or any other political legislative assembly are secular arguments. No good me saying you must do this because the Quran says it, when the Hindu next door will say, but I think we should do this because the Bhagavad Gita says it. I wouldn't accept the Hindu's views, so why should he accept my views? So how do we achieve change? It's hard. The most important message that I believe that can help to achieve change is the simple reminder to every person that you talk to that on the day of judgment, each of us will stand there before God, individually accountable for what we have done. There's a phrase that occurs repeatedly in the Quran, that no soul will bear the burden of another soul. You are responsible for yourself. And it's no good saying, I did this because Maududi said that's what I should do. You have to decide for yourself. And as soon as you can get people willing to think about what Islam means and what God requires for themselves, as opposed to following what the Imam next door has been telling them to do, you're making progress. Muslims need to read the Quran. Many of them don't read the Quran at all in any language that they understand. When I was young, I was taught how to convert Arabic written text into sounds, and I read, I think, 2/30 of the Quran that way before I got distracted and gave up. But I didn't understand a word of what I was reading out. People need to read the Quran in a language that they understand. A good quality translation, preferably multiple translations, so they can see where people's views on interpreting the Quran have differed. I strongly encourage people to read Hadith, because the more they read Hadith, the more skeptical they will become about Hadith. In particular, there are plenty of Hadith in the major Hadith collections that are supposed to be totally reliable, which contradict each other. So if Hadith X says one thing and Hadith Y says another thing, and they're both in Bukhari, by definition, Bukhari cannot have done a perfect job. And the reality is that people who are Hadith experts, none of them pretends that these books are perfect. The only people who pretend these books are perfect are the ignorant extremists. I was once told by a Muslim you would expect that he would know better, who said that to disbelieve a single Hadith is to put yourself outside Islam. Utter nonsense. The more you read and study Islamic history and understand how divergent have been the views of Muslims, and in particular how political power and religious authority in Islam have actually been separate for most of Islamic history. Yes, there was a nominal caliph, but quite often he was basically a captive of the political authority of the time. There was especially when power rested with people who were not originally Arabs, but it would help them to have a sort of Arab caliph for a while. The more you understand the differences in historical Islam between religious authority and political authority. And that's how the more people do this, the more they learn, the less gullible they will be about the views of the theocrats. So it's not easy achieving political change. People have reasons for what they believe, but you can actually do it. And the more you can encourage people to think about things from different perspectives, the more progress you will make. Thank you.